Welcome to Local Leverage, your competitive edge in business. If you run a home service business and want to scale up into a franchise, this episode is the step-by-step blueprint. We're joined today by serial entrepreneur Brandon Vaughn. He built Wyse Coatings into a multi-million-dollar franchise and now helps thousands of business owners do the same. Today we're walking step-by-step through the full franchise journey, from knowing if we're ready to building the systems, handling the legal side, attracting franchisees, and scaling the brand and more. Let's dive right in. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I know, this is great. So, you've been here, done this. I'm curious, maybe as a starting point, how do you know if your home service business is franchisable?
You know, one of the most pivotal moments for me as an entrepreneur was reading the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And at the time when I had All Clean, that's when I read that book, and one of the concepts that he talked about was, imagine your business as a product on a shelf, and are you working on the business instead of in the business? I think the biggest breakthrough for me was in my history. I watched my dad run his small home service window cleaning business for 30 some years. At the end of it, he didn't have a business, he just had a job. He was the bottleneck. Every single thing that he knew about that business existed inside of his head. And I had to work very diligently to try to extract that information out of him. We did all these brain dumps, and then that turned into kind of an obsession with creating systems and putting those types of processes in place. And when we decided to franchise Wyse Coatings, which is my floor coatings company that I turned into an actual franchise, I had a really wise mentor that said, look, your business is turning an average person into a successful entrepreneur. And that's going to require so much training, so many systems, so many processes, so many playbooks, way more than you think, to be able to actually make them successful. And it's a pretty daunting task, that thought of turning an average person into a successful entrepreneur, because a lot of successful entrepreneurs are not average people.
No, exactly.
Pretty exceptional.
Yeah. Well, so, to that end, it's not for everybody, right? Some folks want to have just an independent business and responsible for what I call their 9 square feet of the world. How do you help somebody through the decision-making process? So is franchising or is multi-location even for you?
I'd say one of the first things that I've kind of coached people to do is go and test out whether or not they can run a successful location that is not within quick, immediate driving distance of them personally. Like go in and greenfield a new market that is far enough away from you where it's really inconvenient to have to go travel into that. Now, maybe that's not what you want to do immediately after you have a successful business. Maybe you want to do your next location an hour away so you don't ruin your marriage and make your family super, super upset at you for always being gone. But getting to that place where you can say, okay, using a playbook, I can have a general manager, I can have an employee, or I can have someone go in and start up that location, get it to a successful place where it starts growing organically without you being involved. And we have to follow a playbook in order to do that. It can't just be my entrepreneurial brain that can just figure anything out and I can dive in. It has to be systematic in its approach. And when you go through that exercise, you're going to find that it's insanely difficult. And there's things that you may say, well, this is the playbook step, but when you try it in a different market, it doesn't work for whatever reason.
Right.
It only worked in your market because you had this or that or this specific, nuance and knowledge of this location and the demographics. So to franchise successfully and not have a whole bunch of turnover of your new franchisees, it has to really be broken down into that, most reductive state of just do this, then do this, then do this. And man, you're going to learn a lot trying to get that second location going.
That's really cool. I want to dig more into that playbook because I'm curious about a bunch of things around that. But I guess as you're determining if you're franchisable or if you want to pursue that path, are there certain financial or operational benchmarks that maybe would indicate that, yeah, I'm ready, or that at least I have potential here?
So I'll be honest with you, I'm not a franchise expert whatsoever. When I started Wyse Coatings, I actually started it as a YouTube channel where I wanted to teach home service business owners how to start a business that could run without them and not have to. I set 3 rules for myself. When I start a business I have no experience in, and I'm not going to do any sales from day one. I'm not going to do any work in the field from day one. I'm not even going to answer any phone calls. from day one and only focus on people, systems, and the marketing side of the business. And we launched that in January of 2021. We went from 0 to 100,000 a month in 4 months. We hit 7 figures our first year. And while we were growing, because of the publication of that, YouTube channel, I had all these people reaching out saying, "Man, your brand's amazing. I want to check this out. Are you going to franchise?" Before that moment in time, 0 plans.
Interesting.
Never done a franchise before. Have no clue. Actually hated franchises because I've heard so many horror stories and have tried to coach people inside of a franchise structure where they just were stuck and they're paying this big royalty and they got almost nothing for their royalty that they were paying. And so for me, I said, okay, if I'm going to actually franchise this, I want this to really genuinely be different. I want to provide an unbelievable amount of services, pay for an unbelievable amount of things. And we kind of went into this pretty blind, to be honest. So I got a lot of lumps and bumps and bruises along the way where I started to realize, okay, that's why franchises do this. And okay, yeah, that's why they charge this. And okay, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done this. But that kind of experience of starting that part up, honestly, just doing the work of putting the systems in place, I'd say is probably more important in my mind, from my experience, than even, okay, how do you know exactly when the right time is to do it? Because you're even when you think you kind of know what you're doing, you're still going to be surprised. Getting a really good franchise attorney and a really good franchise development company, in my mind, is probably one of the most important things that you can do going into this, because you have now a partner in your corner that really understands that industry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess it all starts with the fundamentals, right? Building a repeatable, scalable processes, and then if you want to make the move to franchise, then you do that. But so it sounds like you're very system and process focused, which I am as well. Where do you recommend folks start? And if somebody does have an intention to go the franchise route, have you found that there's any differences in the approach to building those SOPs?
Yeah, I would say that, we went with a lot of different franchise coaches to kind of start out with. I actually hired a CEO to come in and launch the franchise side of the brand. At the time when I started Wyse Coatings, I had a full-time job as owner of a company called Conquer that was a business coaching company. We coached over 20,000 business owners in the home services space. We did some cool stuff. We got the Guinness World Record for the world's largest virtual business conference.
Very cool.
And at the time when I launched Wyse Coatings, I didn't have any time to be able to devote to it. And that was kind of the point. Hey, here's how you could start a business. If you do it this way, you don't have to be that person that grinds in it. But with Wyse Coatings franchises, I had to bring in a partner that knew the business more. And in my mind, one of the biggest things that I like to do is think through the who, less so about the how. So finding someone that you can trust, that can drive forward in that, I made the decision to work with someone who had that experience before in the past, that could come in and say, okay, here's the playbook, here's how you do it. And that's kind of been my strategy that I've learned over the years, because I have entrepreneurial ADHD. I got to rein things in, and I need to rely on those systems. I need to rely on really good people and integrators to be able to get stuff done. So, for me, it was going out and finding really good resources, talking to a ton of people, reaching out to CEOs that had started a franchise and be like, tell me my blind spots. What am I going into here blind? And now with AI, you can really get some good critical feedback if you prompt AI to say, okay, tell me all the reasons why I shouldn't franchise right now. Here's all what we're doing now. And you can get some unbelievably critical feedback and advice on how to kind of start up those types of things, just by giving lots of good context of where you're at today.
I love that you brought that up. I've been really going deep into AI tools and things recently. And one of the things that I found is most people gravitate to it for effectively search or some basic content creation, but you just tapped into something that I've recently bumped into, which is asking AI to poke holes in my strategy, right? To pepper me with questions and identify my weak spots, which isn't really intuitive for folks. So you think about it more as a creation tool, but it's fantastic in that regard.
Yeah. Well, think about the thumbs up, thumbs down mentality. AI is trained and incentivized for a response that someone deems as good. When you provide someone really critical feedback, another human, do they typically say, oh, wow, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you telling me why my idea sucks. I'm like, no, not usually. And so I imagine people are a lot more likely to say, like, hey, is this a good idea for me to do this? Because I think it's a good idea. And the guy's like, yeah, it's a great idea. You're so smart, human.
Right.
And they've actually had to kind of roll back some of these models a little bit because they were leaning too heavy on just agreeing with and wanting to people please. Whereas the AI agents that I use, I specifically prompt them to say, be my biggest critic. Where's my blind spots? Tell me exactly how this is going to fail. And I have it just roast me because I need that. Look, if I'm going to get it from someone, I might as well get it from an AI as opposed to my dear friend who I really care a lot about what they think about me. Using it properly. And we've used AI a ton for making our franchisees successful. And we're building out a ton of resources and tools right now that just never would have been possible before in the past to be able to coach our franchisees' success as well. So there's a lot more than just systems right now that are involved where they're almost becoming irrelevant. And agentic AI to be able to just make your franchisees successful is the next wave that we're really diving deep into.
Yeah. Take me back to that tool. What tools are you using for this?
For the AI side?
For specifically like to poke holes in your idea or to challenge your concepts.
So, the most basic approachable tool that any listener listening right now can use is a paid subscription to something like a ChatGPT. Yeah. They have the plus tier, whatever it is, that's $15 a month, and then they have the pro that's $200 a month. The difference between them is staggering. It really is. And I pay the $200 a month version because deep research and all the different models that you have access to and the quantities of which you can use them is unreal. And I can create PhD level thesis and plans and have way more context and stuff to put in. But really the second layer of that, if you are pretty comfortable with those tools, is starting to use tools like N8N and being able to create your own agentic AIs and then connect them to your databases of tools, whether that's Notion or Airtable or QuickBooks or your CRM or your Google Drive folders. And now your agent has everything, a live view of exactly how your business is doing, and can give you an unbelievably more intelligent, accurate piece of advice as opposed to just saying, hey, help my franchise business do this. Like prompt engineering is absolutely everything when it comes to be able to get good, successful results.
Absolutely. So, this kind of ties back to your mention of E-Myth. And you get folks that are maybe getting into home service business because they like to be out in the field. They like to roll a truck and they do cleaning or whatever the thing is, right? Interfacing with the consumer. Are you finding it a challenging move for somebody to go from that kind of operator mentality to really being an orchestrator of teams and now AI? Is that a big leap? And how are you helping them?
It's a massive leap of faith to move outside of that. And I think most business owners, the reason why they go into business in the first place, is they say, I'm really good at the thing. I'm better at it than my boss. Right. Therefore, I would be a better boss. I would be a better business owner. But it's kind of like an iceberg where you have 80% of this iceberg exists underneath the water and you just see little 20% peek up on top. The 20% is the thing, whether it's real estate or plumbing or electrical or painting or whatever that service is, the thing. The 80% is everything else that exists down below. Your HR, your payroll, how to schedule things, your technology stacks, your systems, your checklist, your marketing, your sales scripts, your phone scripts, all these things that have absolutely nothing to do with the thing. Yeah. And that's the universal part that applies to every single service business, every single one. But if you don't have any of those skill sets, you're going to find yourself constantly stuck inside of this trap. And this trap is the DIY death trap, where because you've learned how to DIY most of the stuff in your life, you really have a tendency to continue to rely on your own brain, your own work, your own labor, your own hands to do this stuff. Whereas really you have to say, okay, I'm going to build a business as if I have no arms and no legs. And I'm going to force myself to only use my brain and only use other people And that art, that skill set of being able to set up other people for success is really what separates business owners that stay stuck and business owners that find freedom. AI is a really cool tool because if you can have it design your entire training plans for, your new hires. When I hire someone onto my team, I can work with our AI agents to be able to, send them a really detailed syllabus on what their first 30, 60, 90 days looks like, with roadmaps and who they should be meeting with and why they should be meeting with them. And it's custom, it's tailored specifically to them. So gone are even the days of having templatized systems and checklists. Now you have the ability to take a rough framework and then highly customize it to every new individual that comes in. And you'll find that like the acceleration of training and the reminder sequences and even automating some of these tasks that they would have to do really make the work a lot easier. And it's the same amount of work to train an employee as it is to train an AI agent in a lot of cases. All those same feedback mechanisms of, hey, you did this wrong, you have to do it differently. But the difference is when you do it with an AI agent, they never make that mistake again, ever, forever. So it's like you have to start over from scratch anytime an employee leaves. So it's really disruptive, and it's making the most beginner basic business owner have the potential at his fingertips to have the world's greatest business coach if he would just choose to interact with it.
That's the key, is to choose to interact with it, and also to open your own aperture about what is possible, right? So that you're not stuck with your own beliefs or constraints, but rather seeing this as an accelerator for many, many areas.
Yeah, one visual representation I like to kind of connect AI to someone who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of experience in using AI is to say, imagine you're going to be meeting with a business coach like a Grant Cardone or an Alex Hormozy or an Elon Musk, and they're going to charge you $100,000 an hour to meet with them, and you've bought 15 minutes. So you're going all in on 25 grand. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to make these 15 minutes count. But what they tell you is, hey, in advance of our meeting, send me an email as big as you want. I don't care how big it is. I'll read every word, and I'll study it, and I'll search online, and I'll research it, and I'll do all these case study research. I'm like, literally, I'll spend weeks in advance prepping for that 15-minute call where I can dive in and tell you exactly what you need to work on and exactly what your questions are. Like, how long would you write that email? You would give it so much context and information. This is what talking to AI is like. Yeah. It would be the biggest waste if you showed up on that call with that person for 15 minutes and you're like, help me fix my pressure washing business. Help me create a marketing plan for my pressure. Well, the next questions are, well, what are you doing for marketing? What's this? What's that? You're going to spend 15 minutes just trying to get the person to understand context to be able to give you good advice. This is why prompt engineering is so critical. You can hit record on a voice note and you can talk for 20 minutes and copy and paste that text, and the quality of output that you get is going to be 100 times better than just these little basic vanilla questions. If only people would just think a little bit more intentionally about providing context. Yeah,
great insight there. Brandon, as you think about the kind of the iceberg that you identified with everything below the surface, where do you find small businesses trip up most often? Where are they blocked typically, and how do you suggest they push through those?
I think that for me, there's kind of two areas, and I kind of view it as like a teeter-totter. So I tell a lot of people, look, your business is a lot like a teeter-totter. You have two sides. One is all your sales and marketing efforts, the ability to be able to get new customers. And this is either going good or it's going bad. Your other side is your ability to find and keep and train and make productive your employees, your team. For a service business, this is literally the thing that you need to be able to deliver your services. We're different than a retail store where our inventory is physical things and we sell it that way. We transact on labor, on people, on services, which means that our inventory of people is equally as important as our ability to get customers. External customers, internal customers, and they require very, very similar types of motions. The recruiting side is very, very similar. It's a marketing game to solve. It's a marketing problem to solve. And so if people really lack the ability to do motions of marketing, I'd say this is probably one of the areas where I see the biggest trend of why someone gets stuck. You don't get good sales. You're having a problem getting the phone to ring. You're lacking traditional marketing skills and understanding of how to do that. If you're having a really hard time getting good people in your business, you're lacking the ability to understand how to have those hooks and offers and those motions in a marketing funnel to get recruiting one commit. So they're pretty intertwined and related. And the fulcrum of that teeter-totter is kind of like, the systems and the processes and the checklist and all the things to prevent the whole thing from falling off the rails. But it's usually one of those two areas that I see where people end up getting stuck. And when I get on the coaching call, it's one of the first things that I ask them, first questions. Okay, your business is a teeter-totter. Where are you at right now? And how do we get that like balance? And that helps me to know, where to kind of start honing in. I got more work than I can handle. Okay, you're heavy over here. Yeah. You need this problem solved. Why is this problem not solved? X, Y, Z, and you can kind of drill down from there.
I like that analogy. That's cool. So jumping back onto the kind of the franchise thing, as you went through this process, starting that from a legal perspective and just kind of how you set that all up was probably completely unknown to you. But I'm curious what that process is. I mean, how do you go about that if somebody was interested in going this path? Who should they align with in terms of resource to help navigate, and what are some of the nuances that aren't intuitive?
I think the biggest realization for me in understanding the franchise world was how the federal regulations are unbelievable. And I hate legal documents. The federal government loves them. And there's a reason why they exist, especially in the franchise world, because there's a lot of bad actors that sell opportunities that end up being smoke and mirrors. Clearly, it's an area that needs to be regulated so that people who are investing their life savings don't lose it all, based off of a promise. But that FDD, that franchise disclosure document, that's in essence the Bible of the franchise. It has all the rules and regulations, what's included, what's not included, all third-party audited information about how successful all the claims are, of how much money you'll make, what you should expect profit-wise, and all of it has to be based upon real live numbers. When you just franchise, it's very difficult to be able to put that information out if you're just one single business and your location was never a franchise unit. Like, you started it in a completely different type of way. So getting additional locations, opening up additional units allow you the opportunity to be able to say, hey, this is the closest proxy we have to a franchise without having to franchise it. And now we can use that data to better inform our disclosures on what potential earnings claims may look like, performance of a franchise business. And that's really, really difficult to do. But licensing something to someone can be a good first initial step to kind of test out, okay, I have a person that's not inside my company, who I don't know, other than just meeting them for a certain period of time. Let's bring them in. Let's try to make them successful. Let's give them these resources, and let's see if they become, successful. And then you can use some of those things a little bit more, into your business to be able to kind of make that successful disclosure. So the big thing that's going to happen when you work with the franchise attorney is they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions of how you want to do things. Okay, what will be included? What won't be included? What are you going to charge? What are all the things that you need to? And man, when we first sat down and had that questionnaire, I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, flat-footed.
These things. All I knew is that I just wanted to be way different and pay for way more than any other franchise would, which is what we did. And no wonder people were like, shut up and take my money when they saw, what it was that we offered.
Yeah.
So, you're going to learn a lot. Your first few franchisees, your early adopters, like, you really, really, really need to just make them successful and just pour 100% into them. Because if you can't make your first one successful, all your future ones are going to say, well, why weren't these ones successful? So really getting that first cohort of franchisees being the exact right people. And in my mind, I thought that other entrepreneurs that were successful business owners were like a great proxy for that. Incorrect.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, the ones, I'm not going to be too specific. I'm not going to get too specific into things, but I'll just talk more in terms of like principles.
Yeah.
There's entrepreneurs that have built like a small business and they have done it all themselves. They started a business from scratch. They put all the things in place. They're very passionate and opinionated on exactly how something should be done. They don't like to conform. And then you have the corporate refugees, we could call them, or expatriates that come in and they want to start a business, and they're used to systems and processes and checklists, and they value them, and they just want someone to tell them step by step exactly what to do. And they have the mindset, the work ethic, the ability to have resilience, not quit no matter what. So a lot about like their psychometrics, their demographics, those types of things, their behavioral profiles, their intelligence quotient, their ability to just withstand pressure and hard things. That's actually more of an indicator of success for a franchisee, because you're putting them into a boxed system.
Yeah.
You're saying that they can't do things. Some people are okay with that and thrive on that. Some people buck against the system and, they fight back. Well, why aren't we doing it this way? We should be doing it this way. And we learned a lot, going into that. And I'd say that if there's one big piece of advice I could say is when my franchise attorneys told me what kind of ideal franchisee we wanted, it took me a while to believe it until we started seeing those come in and seeing them be very, very successful. It's like, oh yeah, that is a good idea.
What a great learning. Yeah, it seems, as you explain it, it makes a lot of sense, but it seems counterintuitive up front. You think like, oh, I want a scrappy entrepreneur, but that's not going to be the best.
Yeah, not always. Not always.
Well, you're right back to your teeter-totter again. Now it's about finding the right franchisee. What's that vetting process beyond those kind of psychographics that you just mentioned?
I would say that we have a behavioral profile that we use. So one of the other companies that I own, what my full-time job is right now, because I'm not involved in Wyse Coatings day to day. I have a CEO that runs that company in all of our locations. My main day job is HireBus, which is a AI recruiting company for the trades. And we use the behavioral profile called the right seat assessment to get 21 different behavioral attributes of an individual. We use it for candidates, we use it for employees, we use it for coaching. We also use it for franchisees. And we find out what's our level of proactivity, aggression, dominance, creativity, criticality, emotional support, military leadership. 21 different attributes. And then we have a benchmark based off of most successful franchisees that exist. And it's very, very helpful to identify which of those attributes make people very, very successful and which ones cause them to collapse on themselves like a dying star when things get hard. Which one thing is guaranteed when you own a business: things will get hard, period.
Absolutely. And
prepping them for that, arming them with that information, setting them up for success. Even in the sales process, we're like, this is going to be hard. You will want to quit at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And setting those expectations with them up front and getting them to buy in anyways, to bet on themselves, which is ultimately what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a great tool. I'm eager to learn more about that. Folks should check out HireBus. I think that is one of the things that small businesses tend to verbalize most with me is I just have such a hard time finding good people, right? And it seems like a lot of that too, and maybe you can expand on this, but how much of that is really about understanding what you need for a given role, right? Being able to identify very concretely what are the attributes, skills, and behaviors of the right person for this role. Because sometimes that can be not too intuitive.
I'm going to pause my treadmill because I can't tell if I can hear the audio of my treadmill walking.
You're fine. Glad you got your steps.
That's right. Every day, baby. Every day I'm walking on my treadmill while I'm on my calls. So the behavioral attributes is what you're asking about, because I was having a little bit hard time.
Yeah, I was trying to understand, as you approach finding the right people, I think it starts with really understanding, what do I need for this role, right? What are the expected outcomes? What are the expected behaviors and attributes? And so I assume that, or maybe I shouldn't assume, but how do you help somebody identify those attributes for a given role before you start the search?
The biggest thing that we focus on is, recruiting is a marketing problem to solve. Recruiting franchisees, recruiting technicians, recruiting salespeople, really getting anyone into your company is a marketing and a sales motion. So the marketing starts with really being clear about advertising what makes you unique, why it's a good opportunity, what are the core values that you really stand for, and making sure that messaging actually aligns inside of your job ads and your postings. What's a tougher sell? Convincing someone to get their home repainted, or convincing another human to spend more of their waking hours with you and your business, helping accomplish the goals of the business, than they even spend at home with like their own families, and do that for years. Like that is a tough sell. And the marketing side applies to not only employees, but it applies to franchisees. You have to tell them about the opportunity, what it's there for. They have to be able to resound with the vision of what you're looking to do. They have to understand that what you're offering is a potential path to get those deeper motivated whys that they have in their life, whether that's time freedom, financial freedom, spend more time with their kids, and then making sure that you set really good expectations for what it's going to take to make them successful. All conflict is unmet expectations. If you tell them it's going to be easy, they come in and it's hard, there's the disparity, there's the conflict, there's the I want out of this. And some people in their own minds will convince themselves that it's going to be fine and that they have it. But once they actually get into it, that's more difficult. So the behavioral profile is very helpful because it uses actual behavioral psychology and analysis and identifies these behavioral attributes from a data perspective. So you can see as a number what some of their biggest behavioral attributes are. And if there's some that are really lacking, like one of the biggest ones we look at is personal adjustment. Do they have a good ability to adapt to hardship? Or do they not handle stress well? Or can they handle stress really well? That can all be done with behavioral assessments and tools and resources. And it gives you kind of those insights and opens up the ability to have some conversations, to drill down a little bit more and ask some deeper questions and unpack a little bit more about, tell me a time when you had a really, really tough go and what compelled you to power through. Tell me some more stories. Tell me another story. So it frames the conversation in a way as you kind of do this exploratory exercise of, is this someone that I want to be a business partner with? Or for an employee, is this someone that I believe will be a good fit onto our team, that will stay with us for a long time, but ultimately they'll be happy and we'll be happy. And it's like speed dating.
Yeah, right.
It's speed courtship, and it's hard to do, but it really is. It's an important exercise, and to use as many resources as you can, as opposed to just purely rolling the dice.
Absolutely. That's a great resource. If folks want to learn more about HireBus or Concur, how do they get a hold of you?
So if they go to hirebus.com/local leverage, that will be probably one of the best ways to just learn a little bit more about HireBus, what we do. We do free strategy sessions. So oftentimes business owners come to us when they say, I'm having a really hard time finding salespeople, technicians, project managers, office managers, even all the way up to a CEO. We've hired CEOs for companies, for our owner investors that buy businesses and need to place an operator and integrator inside of those. So we do the full suite all the way down to laborers. And if our most successful customers are ones that need to hire several sales reps, they always need an always-on funnel for technicians because they're constantly growing and expanding. And we do that all on autopilot for them and just deliver the top 3% of talent without them having to do any of the heavy lifting. All the job postings, writing, first interviews, all of it. And it's all leveraging AI and these behavioral assessments and tools that I'm referencing. So hop on there, check it out, and you can learn a little bit more there. Concur, I did end up selling. So that company is no longer a company that I own, but that was a amazing, amazing platform to just get the discipline of coaching others up to success, and was an awesome chapter of my life, but I'm focused on HireBus now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, great. Make sure to hit subscribe if this was useful to you, and please share it with friends and colleagues that can also find value from this. Brandon, thank you again for all the knowledge you dropped here.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I really appreciate it, and thanks everyone for tuning in and listening as well. Hope to be back again someday.
Absolutely.